Good morning. I'm, still pondering last night's State of the Union by Trump and the amazing response by Stacey Abrams. I think the best response the Democrats have ever done. But
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Well, I agree
Yeah,
with you. I think Stacy really was the one who gave the State of the Union.
yeah,
I think she was the one to really put the State of the Union out there.
right.
S-
She was fantastic, and she, just showed the difference. I mean, the sense, and I know we're supposed to talk about the report we just put out yesterday, but this notion of actually being honest about what the issues are,
mhm.
how you're going to solve them, and how you kind of lead with optimism. It's that's not, that's kind of sort of what State of Unions are supposed to be about. Not
Right.
going to people and telling them you're going to retaliate against them if they actually do their constitutional responsibilities. Not ignoring that you just close the government for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and
Right.
not one word about public education.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. Not a single word.
not not a single word about how you're actually going to help move a country forward for the 90% of kids that go to, for the 90% of kids in America, the
Hmm.
90% of kids that go to school in public education. I found that stunning to, just try to go at the margins. And, look, I love the story about the, Holocaust survivor and and the one who opened up the camp. But notice that was a refugee, an immigrant refugee, 50, 60 years ago. When at the same time, what he's done about immigrant refugees right now.
Hey,
But
and that's something. And that's something.
yeah,
Just a blatant hypocrisy.
blatant. It was just the the dog whistles have become silent calls.
Yeah.
And and just so that's so you just the juxtapositioning between that and Stacy, who, I mean, pretty remarkable, wrote her own speech and really went out with values and what we need to do.
Yeah.
I just thought the contrast was just palpable and powerful.
Yeah. No. And Stacy is obviously exceptional. What I want to do though, because we do have uh, uh, you and I have an assignment to discuss, but
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
but, but
Sorry.
but no, that's fine. But before we get back on task with that though, just last time we talked, we were in the midst of the LA teacher strike.
Right.
Give us a final report on that and
Yeah.
how that went and what was won and all of that, if you would. And then I think something's going on in Oakland right now too, right?
Oakland, there's so Oakland is not one of our locals, so we're
I
not
see.
as
Okay.
obviously as involved in Oakland or Denver, but we have the paraprofessionals in Denver who are completely supporting the Denver teachers, and we are supporting the Oakland educators from afar and creating and giving them solidarity that they need. And I've talked to them some, but what's happened. The, I think LA represents a paradigm shift
Hmm.
in the reordering of priorities from alternatives to public education to a town, a city's responsibility to strengthen its public schools. And that's the postscript of LA. And you saw that. So what they won in a 6-day strike was a contract that put a bunch more resources over the course of the next 3 or 4 years into neighborhood public schools, like nurses, lowering class sizes teachers have so teachers can individuate instruction or differentiate instruction to the needs of kids. guidance counselors, um, task forces to really look at how do you have more time for teaching and less time for testing.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, it's in some ways, even though there was no huge struggle publicly about it, it's very similar to what the new New York City teachers contract was, in terms of what do you do at a school level to actually strengthen outcomes for children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what people in our space have learned is that teachers need to be not just seen but heard.
Right.
You need to work together with them. And so that's what was embedded in the contract, provision. But what really happened as well is that that the level of support that educators got all throughout LA, I think, was shocking to the powers that be. I mean, it was we were so grateful about it.
Yeah.
But it was shocking to the powers that be.
That was big.
Because they told themselves a story. When you tell the story over and over again, this narrative, you start believing it. They told themselves the story that 600 million, siphoning off 600 million to charters and increasing charter schools by 297% in 10 years, that was the wave of the future.
Right.
And a competitive system was the wave of the future. And basically, LA said to them, wasn't just the teachers. LA said to the Eli Broads of the world, the Netflix Reed Hastings of the world, who has paid for a lot of this stuff. No, that's not who we are. That's not what we want.
Right.
And not let's get rid of charter schools, but it's wait a second. Let's actually reorder priorities so that the schools in our neighborhoods get the resources that teachers need so that they can teach.
Right.
That's why I'm calling it a paradigm shift.
No, and that for all those reasons, that was a great victory. Let me just mention too, something you all are involved in the. What about Chicago? There's a
charter school strike right now in Chicago.
Right.
This is the second of Chicago. We have organized our union, local there. Actually, it was a separate local, and they voted. Both the Chicago Teachers Union and the separate local voted to join together, which was pretty impressive.
Okay.
So we actually have organized a third of the charter schools in Chicago, and this one, and so the first actually teachers strike in a charter school was in December in Chicago in the Yeshiva schools. This one is in a different chain called CSICS, C6. And they've been on strike for 2 days. I'm probably going to get over there tomorrow, I'm hoping.
Okay.
But it's the same issues. How do you create conditions that are conducive to teaching and learning? How do you lower class sizes so that teachers can actually differentiate instruction to the needs of kids? And in Chicago, how do you create an equity and a fairness? Because, between the Chicago public school system and the charter school system. And again, it's, charter schools, they don't quite know who they are. I mean, I run one in the South Bronx that is doing extraordinarily well. We actually have had somewhere between 95 and 100% graduation rate for the last 6 years. We're extending to a 7th and 8th grade now. And we do things like having a guidance counselor for every 100 kids. But, we understand it is public funds in a charter space. It's a unionized charter school, and we believe we're public school educators and, follow and are accountable and transparent, and think about this as an incubator, the likes of which Al Shanker thought about when he and others first thought about the word charter 20, 30 years ago. But, these big chains have hijacked the concept and use it as a separate system to compete with public schools and to try to destabilize public schools. That's essentially what Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump mean when they use the term school choice. And they want to take away the public school choices from parents and destabilize and privatize.
Yeah, yeah. So in Chicago, um, uh, charter school teachers are unionized.
Yep. And
Okay,
there's about 300 schools where charter school teachers are unionized.
okay,
It's
okay.
about 10. So charters have, charters have lost a lot of their luster. They're not growing anymore by leaps and bounds. There's been somewhat of a decline. Um, they're in, as I call them, their adolescence. In Ohio, for example, um, there's been a whole bunch of them that have closed. Same in terms of Michigan.
Right.
Ohio had a huge scandal with these ECOT charter schools, which were basically virtual schools, and they defrauded the state to the tune of millions of dollars. The same kind of schools that DeSantis is trying to create in Florida. You give somebody, think about this racket, virtual charter school. So basically you can homeschool, you can just have a computer in front of a kid, and you say, okay, that costs, the state, that costs you $10,000 per kid, just for sake of argument, maybe $8,000 per kid. And what it really costs is maybe $1,000 per kid, because you don't have a teacher there, you just have a computer there. So the operator is taking, a bunch of money as profit. And then what ECOT did is they defrauded Ohio. And they said they had like 30,000 kids, I don't remember the exact numbers, when they had 5. And so that racket, finally, even the Republican for governor, the Republican candidates for governor, DeWine, they all were saying, oh, no, this is wrong. And we've seen that in Arizona. We've seen that in other places. So charters in their adolescence, what essentially has happened is that they do essentially, they do what the public schools do. It's really social, economic issues
Mm-hmm.
that dictate, unfortunately, how well or poorly kids do. And that's what we have to tackle, not continuing to have an investment crisis in public schools
Right.
because the privatizers or the austerity hawks are the people who want to do tax cuts for the rich instead of deal with children all across America, like what happened in Oklahoma.
Right.
We have to fight that. And frankly, we're at a meeting in the AFT right now, and that's our focus as a union. How do we deal with the investment crisis?
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with the fact that 25 states spend less on public education today than they did before the recession, and worse, 41 states spend less on higher education? The student debt has gone in 10 years from $600 billion to $1.5 trillion. A lot of that is a direct consequence of the fact that the states have moved away from their investment.
Um,
More information than you ever wanted.
No,
Sorry.
that's fine. No, we need to hear all that. So there's also a report out today, we should say,
Yep.
on the investment that how teachers, do I have this right? Teachers' retirements are tied up in investments in private prisons, correct?
Right. So what we saw, look, we have a pension council of basically trustees from, I don't know, about 25 of the state's teachers' retirement systems. Educators who are
Right.
overseeing the assets. And over the summer, we really started thinking about both the private operators who were running the prisons on the border that were incarcerating immigrant refugees, and then started really thinking about and looking at these private operators who are essentially running the incarceration system in the United States. And, so this is separate from the horrible debacle, tragedy, humanitarian crisis that's going on in Brooklyn right now,
Yeah.
which in and of itself is horrible. And that facility is run directly by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But what you see is that companies like Core Civic and GEO Group, which basically have incarcerated tens of thousands of people, their business model depends on putting more and more people in prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
They make billions of dollars on the backs of inmates, and they are all private companies. So we started looking at this to see what do any of the pension funds that, where teachers get their retirement security, are they invested in this? Answer is yes. And so what we did yesterday is we put this big report out to all of the trustees in all of the pension systems that we know, and talked about how this is not just a humanitarian crisis, which personally, that's my bias. This is a humanitarian crisis, a civil rights crisis. But for the purposes of fiduciaries, it's also a fiscal, a legal, a regulatory, and a political crisis that carries with them very risky implications. And they, as trustees, must look at that because of all those other implications. And hoping that people will actually, now when they see the facts, they look at it and they divest from these entities and not buy the stock of, for the purposes of pension funds, of GEO companies like Core Civic and GEO Group. Because if you don't actually attack people in their pocketbook, in a country where Trump thinks of everything in terms of money, where he has said to these corporations, just make as much money as you want. Look what he said to Saudi Arabia. I don't care about Khashoggi. We're selling them big, buckets of arms. Money counts here. And so we wanted to actually look at this through the lens of whether these investments are risky. Our view was yes, and we put this report out.
Some teachers, folks, we're talking about teachers' pension funds invested in private prison industry. Some major states and cities, Chicago, New Jersey, California, have voted to no longer have their pension funds invested in private prison and for-profit prison corporations. So I guess
CalSTRS, New Jersey Pension Fund, and Chicago Teachers Pension Fund have all voted to divest.
So I guess the goal is to get other pension funds in other major cities and states to do the same thing.
Correct, because so you have to start with the threshold. So personally, of course, we start with the threshold of the civil rights crisis, the humanitarian crisis. But for the purposes of pension funds, you have to start with the threshold about the investment risk. And when you look at what has happened here, there's a huge risk. I mean, the tide is turning. That's a risk to these companies. When you have a bipartisan bill that gets passed, in December, kind of eclipsed by the fact that, of the government shutdown, that shows that the tide is turning against incarceration. Thank God. So, but what we see, and you know this better than anybody, Mark, when the United States of America incarcerates more people than anywhere else, and that incarceration is disproportionately black and brown. And when you see companies whose business model is to incarcerate more and they are so ever present in certain states, then you have a really broken justice system.
Folks, find out more at AFT Union on Twitter. The video is there as I've been streaming it on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube right now as we speak. The report comes out today, so will it be available at the website, Randy?
Yes.
So, folks, we need to be up on this because far too many of us now. I'm just going to say this now. There might also be a case to be made, right, Randy? They're not only teachers' pension funds, but if you are a government employee, period, in a state, your pension fund might be going toward this, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly right. And in fact, AFSCME is one of our partners.
Good.
Who released the report with us. And look, I'll even go further. There's a lot of people invested in 401ks. Look at your statements.
Yeah.
You may also be invested in these kind of companies.
Right.
So we'll have the report on the website. You'll see as part of the report. I talk about the biggies like Core Civic and Geo Group.
Yeah.
But call the people that you invest in. If you have a 401k, look at that report. Call the people you invest in. Say, I don't want to be in that stock.
Yeah.
You have a right. Individuals have a right to say, I don't want my retirement funds being invested in that company. I don't want my retirement funds being used to incarcerate people or make a profit on that incarceration.
And what Randy is also, what we have to realize, because what the report also shows, we know this, whether how many of our family, friends, relatives are caught up in the criminal justice system in the first place. Pension is not an entitlement. That's a dirty word, a pejorative that the right wing made up. That's your money. That's our money that we work. So your money is helping to finance mass incarceration. That's the bottom line. If your pension is caught up in that, folks, and that's the thing that AFT is pointing out. The report is available. I see it now. In fact, it's on the website right now, aft.org, aft.org, folks, to check it out. This is very important, and please get involved in this movement.
And we tweeted about it yesterday, so if anybody goes to my Twitter, account, you can get the report right from there as well, our Weingarten. So we just, it is what we're trying to do, Mark. Look, you know who we are.
Yes.
As a union. We fight for a better life. We fight for a voice at work. We fight for a voice in our democracy. And what we're trying to do is use all the different avenues we have to actually make that real.
That's right.
And when we see this, a lot of us have said, what can we do? Not just how do we decry this horrible increased rate of incarceration? How do we decry not giving people second chances? We're educators. We are the world of second chances.
Yeah.
But what else do we do but decry it? Are there other things we can do? And, look, L.A., after 10 years of trying to reorder priorities, they went on strike. West Virginia, after trying to reorder priorities, they went on strike. But there are other, those are what you're seeing with us is we're not stopping at just saying that something is wrong, being ignored. We're trying to figure out the other kind of actions we can take to make this real.
Yeah. AFT.org, on Twitter, R. Weingarten. Very important report. Randy, we thank you for that. Look, before you go, Randy's a teacher, like I am, like many of us are. So I'm going to let you stick around because it's Black History Month. We have our Black History Month question on the floor. And I'm going to let our listener answer it in front of you since you're a teacher.
Great.
We all learn.
Fantastic.
So we actually, Cornelius is going to take a shot at this. Cornelius, good morning to you. Name the Black sea captain and entrepreneur in the 19th century who attempted to resettle African Americans in Africa and the country where he attempted to resettle. Cornelius is in Michigan. Cornelius, you have an answer?
Yeah, it's Paul Cuffey.
Okay, correct? And the country.
And he's Sierra Leone.
Very good. You got it. Thank you, man.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations. So what
All
happens
right.
is you and the other contestants on Friday will have a sort of a final four, and the winner on Friday of those four, those of you who win Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, one of you will win on Friday, and then you'll get the winner will receive an African ancestry test kit. Trace your DNA, know your roots. So congratulations, Cornelius. Cornelius is a good student, isn't he, Randy?
He's awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you,
I was
Cornelius.
impressed.
Thank
All
you,
right, thank you.
Cornelius. All right, man. Take care now. We'll talk to you on Friday. All righty. Randy, Weingarten, folks, AFT.org. Read the report. Folk, everybody will be looking at where their money is going in the pension. Be clear on that. And AFT is encouraging us to do that through the teacher pensions. But I think many of us who work for some of these entities, whether it be in the government, AFSCME is a partner, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, anyone who has a 401k ought to be looking at that. So read the report, AFT.org, please, ma'am, please, sir. The report on private prisons, and investment risks by AFT. Randy, thanks as always, okay?
You're welcome.
And
Thanks, Mark.
appreciate in the words of Frederick Douglass, this is Black History Month, I appreciate yours and AFT's eternal vigilance, Randy, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
We are greatly honored by that, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care now. Enjoy your day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. Folks, stay tuned. Sirius XM Progress 127, Resistance Radio. Get woke, get ready for impeachment. This is MIP.
The revolution will not be